Hello people, GMT here, and today I'm going to make a guide. It is something that I haven't done in a while, and since right now there are so many new players all playing for the easiest comps that they know, I think it's a great time to try and show them through this team planner right here some other options that they could play for. So it's been a while since I went in this place, so let's get rid of all the floral grass stuff there. And today I'm going to talk about sound. So before we even start, what is sound? So sound isn't a typical Pokemon type that you may know, but it is a Pokemon type that had been theorized for a while. It could have been what Fairy was in Generation 6. To be honest, there is still a place to this day to make a sound type, and so in this game, sound actually has its place. Let's look at what the synergy does. So sound is a synergy that only scales up to 6 units, as you can see right here, and it activates every time a sound unit casts its ability. Okay? So first, you actually wake up all asleep allies. So against some very specific compositions that put you asleep, you actually counter that, but it doesn't really matter too much. What matters is that every time you use an ability, you actually grant stats to your team. With Sound 2, you get +1 attack. With Sound 4, you add +5% attack speed to that. And with Sound 6, which is the big threshold, you also add 3 PP. So right now, this looks like nothing, right? Compared with Fire, that's +3 attack per auto attack. You use a lot more auto attack than spells and whatever. Keep in mind that each spell actually gives +1 attack to your whole team, which with 6 sound units makes +6 attack in total per spell, which is actually a lot more than what it seems at first glance. But it can be better than Fire, you may say. So here is why we will play sound in a very specific fashion. And the core unit in this composition will actually be this Flabébé over here. Look at its spell. Fairy Wind actually gives PP to all allied Pokemon except the user. Whenever Flabébé casts, the whole team can actually throw their spell. So what happens when you play sound? Actually, you give a Manaphy egg to Flabébé, which, if you do not know what Manaphy egg does, let's just go here. It should be down there, yes. +50 starting PP and 20 PP after casting its ability, which means that whenever you hold this item, you will not only be able to cast for the first time your ability very early into the round, and you will also cast it way more often. So if you give this item to Flabébé once it has evolved into Fluid, mostly, then you can actually create what I personally call the Soundpocalypse. And the idea behind the Soundpocalypse is that Fluid casts gives mana to the whole team. So the whole team casts. With the sound synergy, it gives PP to Fluid, which casts again, giving mana to the whole team, which casts again, which makes Fluid cast, so on, so forth. And you can actually change spell over spell over spell over spell over spell in a matter of seconds. Every unit will just constantly cast spells. And you will actually just need to survive the first 4 to 5 seconds of the round until you just burst the opponent out with like just a spam of abilities. Which actually is hilarious to watch and is, to be fair, acceptably strong. It is a decent synergy. I wouldn't say it is top 1, but it is definitely playable. So the pros for this composition is that it is not so widely played, which means that you will pretty much never be contested. So right now, outside of sound, Flabébé is just never played. It is not played for fairy because nobody plays fairy. It is not played for floral because floral is only played besides grass, which means that only sound player will actually try to roll for Flabébé. And since nobody plays sound, then you will probably be able to roll for this unit pretty much every game. Same goes for Igglybuff. Nobody plays this guy, and since they are both uncommon, the best level to roll for them is actually 6. Guess what? Sound actually only needs 6 units to be maxed out. So the idea behind sound is just to accumulate some early sound units, which will mostly be Zubat, Igglybuff, Flabébé. You make a Fairy Stone to evolve Eevee into Sylveon, and then you unique, that will be whichever one of those, and you will need a tiny bit of luck to get either Whismer or Fuecoco or any additional sound unit. Right, any of these can enter the comp. So 6 sound units, you remain level 6, you slow roll until this unit in particular evolves, but also Igglybuff. You can even be 6 at like around 20, it doesn't even matter. Usually I go level 7 after level 20, and then you just Sound Apocalypse your opponents. Do not be afraid to lose round. This composition actually scales pretty slowly, but in the late game you can obliterate most comps that you actually thought until now that were strong. And in particular, I think about Fire. Fire has a pretty bad matchup into Sound, because once you activate the Sound Apocalypse, they just get burst, and Fire hates getting burst. And because in the current meta most threats to Fire are actually physical damage, usually Fire player will build armor. However, since you are spamming spells, Sound actually deals a lot of magic damage. And even if you happen to face Fire players that build magic resist, you also gain a ton of attack and attack speed, which means that even then you can also inflict physical damage. So this comp is actually mixed. It's extremely hard to build defensively against Sound, which is one of the advantages of this composition. So let's go back now into the team planner. What you want to do in the early level is to look for mostly Zubat and Flabébé or Igglybuff, right? These 3 units are the first units that you will get. The idea is that if you can, before Gyarados, activate Sound 4, then it is better to make sure you get a portal. Sometimes you won't be able to do it, but most of the time you should be able, if you roll a few times, to get some of these 4 units. Sometimes you'll even get one of the additionals or whatever. So before round 10 you just want 4 sound units. You do not necessarily need them to be evolved, even though it would be better to have one of these evolved, just because with only 4 sound units plus whatever is your 5th units, sometimes you won't be able to beat Gyarados, because these units here are have a very low damage input. This unit does no damage, this unit does no damage. So you better evolve the Zubat early on if it is at all possible. Okay? So what will most likely your board look like? The 2 key units are of course Fluet. Realistically it can become Florges, but let's skip Fluet because you will get it every single game. And your unique, and the best unique you can get would be Chingling. So if you do not know the mechanic, to evolve Chingling into Chimeshow, you actually need a Stardust. So Stardust takes 1 Miracle Seed and 1 Mystic Water to be made. So you need to be fishing for Mystical Water and Miracle Seeds as early as possible. It is absolutely essential that you get these 2 these two components. Then turn 10, if you get here the jingling, you instantly evolve it into chime show. Of course, if you get chatot, you won't need the Stardust anymore. But even then, Stardust is an extremely good component into a sound comp, just because you spam spells, and every time you cast a spell, you actually gain shield. So it is scaling extremely well with sound. Right? So these two units are both decent, even though I would say Chime Show is the better out of the two. So these two are absolutely key. Chime Show absolutely needs a Stardust, and this guy right here, he absolutely needs a Manaphy egg. This is not even debatable. If you do not have this, and where is it? And this, then it isn't even worth a try. You shouldn't even try to play the comp without these two items here, right? Which actually requires 3 Mystic Water, which is fine, because actually in this current meta, Mystic Water is actually one of the weakest components, so nobody is actually going to go for them on carousels. Right? People don't care about mana right now. Mystic Water isn't that popular. So you should be able to get them pretty easily. Then, you should also be looking for 1 Heart Scale and 1 Fossil Stone in order to make this guy right here, which requires a Moonstone. The reason for that is because if you look at sound, there aren't that many units. There is 1. This guy right here is extremely hard to get because you need to roll and you do not want to do that early on. So 1, 2, 3, 4, but it's a rare. 5 with your unique, and then you would have to go as far as getting Fuecoco, that for some reason doesn't seem to be here. Oh, he's there, okay. But Fuecoco is epic, so at level 6 it is actually pretty hard to get him. So if you can get a Fairy Stone to evolve Eevee, it is actually really strong. Eevee is a very good unit into a sound composition. It doesn't cost you much, only an item to evolve and get pretty decent stats, and it can really carry your mid-game. So this unit right here, I would advise to go for it every single sound game if you can. And these two actually together activate Fairy 3, which with Jigglypuff, Fairy 2, sorry, which with Jigglypuff activate Fairy 3, which means that your level 7 can actually be any fairy really, to activate Fairy 4 and reinforce your front line. Right? The fairy that I would consider playing would be Atrem, just because it's an uncommon, which means that you can actually get him while rolling at level 6, even though it doesn't enter the comp right now. And it also has Psychic, which combines with Chime Show. So let's get rid of this guy for the time being and get back to sound. So we've got these 4 units, that is sound 4. Then you'll have probably Zubat. And then you will have, let's say, Whismur. So the way I will position my units would be something probably like this. You always want to protect your flirt, and actually if you look at Chime Show spell, it's passive I mean, you actually double the sound effects of the unit that casts in a 2 cells radius around you, which means that Chime Show has to somewhat be placed in the middle of the pack. You want Chime Show in the middle and then the other units close to it, right? Which is why I usually do not put these units in the front line. I would rather have them in the back line, let the opponent walk towards me, so these units remain close to Chime Show. Let's look at the additionals. They are not the most popular additional, and I actually played 2 sound games today, and in both of them there were literally not a single additional sound available. But what could theoretically be possible? You've got here Zubat that is flying. You could have Woobat that is also flying, and then Noibat that is also flying, and play that with Chatot that is also flying. So with these 4 units, you actually have Sound 4, Flying 4, which means that you could, from here on, go for like Flying 8, Sound 4, which would be super strong. This is one of your options. But Zubat is also really strong just because it is uncommon, so you will get him to evolve pretty easily, and it has Psychic, which means that if you get this guy besides Chimshow, and later on you get this guy right here, then you already have Psychic 3. Could you hope to activate Psychic 4? Let's watch. If Bronzong is available, yes, this is a Psychic 4 game. However, it doesn't seem to be the case with other units, which means that if you ever want to do that, maybe consider making a Psychic Stone. But still, this is actually a pretty free Psychic 3, Psychic 4, sorry, at level 7, which is really neat to be completely fair. What else is really good in sound? Look at this guy right here, Clowitzer. Actually, Clowitzer has a ton of mana, so it doesn't cast all too much, but every cast deals extreme damage and actually triples the sound effect. So this guy stacks sound effects faster than anyone else, even though it casts it casts less often. So if you get this guy to cast even once, it may obliterate a whole area of the field. Which means that, to be fair, if you were to give a Psychic Stone to any sound unit, consider giving it to Clowitzer, even though it is not bad to give it to Flirt or to this guy right here, because these two actually buff your whole team, so buffing your whole team more is never really bad. I wouldn't advise playing Cricketune. I don't think Cricketune is that great, reducing defense while you mostly do magic damage. Explode actually takes a while to scale during a round, but it has normal and you can pretty easily activate normal 3, so maybe sometimes, but it doesn't have my priority, to be honest. Noivern is decent. Noivern is decent because 7-second paralyzed is actually a lot, and it's in AoE, so it's really great. And this guy right here actually does a lot of damage too. So if you need some frontline, he's basically the melee Clowitzer, if that makes any sense. Deals a ton of AoE damage, but this guy is in the front line while this guy is in the back line. And you usually won't get both of them. Let's talk about Fuecoco. So Fuecoco is actually a really good option. You should basically, unless you are playing Flying 4, always be doing this at some point, right? Fuecoco can take all of your what am I even doing? Can you please? Yeah. Fuecoco can take all of your AP stuff and is in the common pool, which means that whenever you are not trying something funny with the additional units, you can always rely on Fuecoco for your late game damage, which is really neat to have. Pay attention regionally when you can get Akamoho, and the reason for that is that Akamoho actually is a dragon, and you also have here Altaria as a dragon, and you also can have here Noibat as a dragon, which means that there are actually 3 sound dragons in the game, and these can go a pretty big way into helping your team become strong. So Altaria actually doubles Fairy, which means that you can, in the very late game, probably activate Fairy 6 if you have dragons. This guy activates Fighting 2, which helps you slightly survive the early round. Look at its spell. Actually, it boosts your team even better than this guy would. So you can actually replace Sylveon with Akamoho and then give the stone to any other unit that would not be fairy to activate one more level of the fairy synergy, which can actually carry you a big way. So pay attention if you can ever play Jangmo-O. It is actually a pretty neat unit to have in your sound composition. There are some matchlings, and if you can try to get early eggs, I would advise you try and get them, just in case you would get any of these two units, because both are actually decent. Primarina gives you Fairy, which is extremely good. And also, Primarina actually heal burns, which in the current meta, with how much fire comps there are, is actually pretty strong. And then this guy actually isn't all too great, to be fair, because sure, it poisons for a lot of time and it goes in AoE. However, since it throws its prey as the unit with the highest HP, it is not that likely that you will go through the entire enemy team. So I would say Bryon and into Primarina are actually better units than Seismitoad, right? So, legendary, there is only one. It is Meloetta, which means every sound game, if you take a sound portal turn 20, you always get Meloetta. And what Meloetta does is actually putting the whole enemy team asleep for 2 seconds, which scales with AP. Which means that if you give this guy AP, you can actually have pretty insane CC onto the enemy team. And look at its mana, it's only 60. Which means that you can pretty much sleeplock the entire enemy team in some situation. Meloetta is actually pretty insane if you put it in the backline, right besides like the likes of Chime Show and Flute. Also note that it has 4 range. It is extremely rare in Pokemon Auto Chess to have 4 range. This is actually the highest ranged unit in the whole game. So if you corner it and give it some AD and attack speed item, this can actually become a pretty insane damage dealer. And look at its base AD, 25, it's super high. So Meloetta can actually act as a super strong AD carry. And basically you stunlock the whole enemy team and you kill them while they sleep. It is actually pretty insane. So what will your late game composition look like? You will always have Meloetta, which I'll put here in the corner, right? What remains of my front line will most likely be something like this. And then the 7th unit in most of the game will be Crocalor. And here you have a sound composition that doesn't rely on any regional or any additional. This composition right here you can make every game, which is a big strength of this composition. You can always get to this point, with maybe sometimes Chime Show being Chatot, but Chatot is very decent. It is not at all a problem to be playing Chatot. For items now, these 3 are essential, but what can be played besides these items? I would strongly advise a Pokemonomicon. What did I just do? Come back, Chime Show, please, and get your item back. Where is it? It's here. So let's look at the spells here. Chime Show hits the whole enemy composition, which means that whenever you give it a Pokemonomicon, it will actually put anti-heal onto the entire enemy team, which means if you play against fire human, human is no longer useful. If you play against monsters, they won't regen anymore. And if you play against grass, which actually becomes more and more popular, you actually completely obliterate grass with that item. It is an extremely strong item, and if we look here at Chatot, Chatot actually also deals damage to the entire enemy team, which means that Chatot can also wear a Pokémonomicon. So this item can actually be slammed on both the turn 10 unique units, which makes it a really strong option for sound compositions. Besides that, you want to have a tanky frontline because you need to survive enough to have your first casts with your backline to start the sound apocalypse with Fluid creating mana, then making everyone cast, and Fluid gets more mana and then just cast. You need to cast once, so you need this frontline to survive, which means that you mostly want at least 2 defensive items. I would advise, where is it? Here, the Rocky Helmet. Onto, let's say, this guy. Rocky Helmet is actually the best tank items against physical damage, and since the meta right now is so heavily centered around physical damage, it is actually a really good item to have onto your frontline. Another great option would be the Pokédoll. I really like the Pokédoll a lot. If you get several Nevermelt Ices, you can also go for Assault Vest. Assault Vest is pretty decent. And you could also go for a Central Cleanse tag. And always never forget to put it in the middle of your front line, right? So some tanky items for your front line are actually necessary. So I gave you a few options. If you do not get anything better, make a Smoke Ball. But since Smoke Ball costs some mana component, you want to use it for something better than this. Something else that you can build is the Delta Orb. Delta Orb actually generates bonus mana for you and your adjacent units, which means that you can have Flirt be here in the middle, and it will actually boost these two guys' mana generation, because these 3 guys will actually very rarely move because they have so much range. And then I would probably position something like this to peel for this guy as much as possible and still keep it somewhat in the center, as you can see. I could probably even do this, right? Then, what else? If you get some AD stuff, as I said before, I would advise giving them to this guy right here. So these kind of items, if you get them, give them to Meloetta. These are not your priority, but they can still save you late game. So they aren't like uber trash, they are okay. What else? Mana items are actually very strong. So Mana Scarf, you basically want every mana stuff onto this guy right here. If you get some AP, who are the best users of AP? It's either Fuecoco right here, or it is Float right here. These 2 units are the better user of AP, just because more AP on Float means more mana on everyone. And if you lack damage on these spells, it doesn't really matter if you cast them twice. Casting them twice actually means you double the damage, so the more they cast, the more they deal damage, which means that giving AP to this guy is actually giving damage to your entire composition. Whereas giving damage to Fuecoco here is only giving damage to Fuecoco, right? I didn't really discuss Wailord. Wailord is kinda niche, it's very rarely available, but it is actually a pretty good front line. To be honest, if you get more tanky items, you can actually replace Fuecoco with this guy. Right, it is actually a very decent unit. very tanky, lot of HP, so if you can get resistances, actually give it to this guy. So let's say you have, where is it? You have the Orochi helmet and the assault vest. They will be better off on Wailord than on Sylveon for sure. So if this guy is available, put your tanky stuff on it, and just put him in the center of your front line. He can actually carry you for good. Anything else about sound? I think this covers the basic. Most of the games you will actually remain level 7. But if sometimes you can go level 8, sometimes what do you really want besides this? I would say maybe activate normal. So if we look at the normal units available, I would say let's look at the ultras that are the best. I would say Chansey actually gives you a lot of shield, which can help your composition in many ways. But to be honest, Lopunny is also very decent, so it can really be any of the two, and then you get some more shield with normal, which is pretty acceptable. Otherwise, if you get another fairy stone or more fairy additionals or maybe a fairy egg, then consider playing a 6 fairy. And in this case, which one would I go for? If I do not look at the additionals, actually Togekiss gets you fairy plus normal. So mostly it will be Togetic, but it gives you a shield besides your fairy 6 activation, which means that this guy can actually be pretty good. What else? Because you cast a lot, maybe consider playing a Kirlia, but you probably already have enough damage with these 3 guys. What else? Are any of these any good? I mean, they are all pretty much one and the same, right? And in the very late game, like, make this become this. So if you go beyond Sound 6, even though the synergy doesn't progress anymore, keep in mind that the more sound units there are, the more mana you generate, because the more spells you cast. Which means that you can actually even improve your Sound Apocalypse by going beyond Sound 6. It isn't because Sound 7 or Sound 8 don't exist that you cannot play Sound 8. Actually, the more sound units you have, the better. Right? Because what matters in the end is the strength of your Sound Apocalypse. So that was JMT. I hope you will give this composition a try. I think it is a pretty niche but pretty decent one to play. It is actually really fun, and I think playing sound actually teaches you a lot of the mechanics of the game. The slow roll at level 6 is actually very different from anything else, so it is something good to have in your arsenal. To have been playing this sometimes in your journey will actually make you a better player overall. I'll see you in the next one. Hope you enjoy the content. Bye, people.